The cold, dark water of the lake offered no explanation. 44 years, more than 4 decades of silence, of unanswered questions, of grief swallowed by the northwest mist. Then, in the autumn of 2025, something anomalous surfaced from the depths. A routine FBI environmental survey, armed with advanced sonar, detected an unnatural geometric shape buried beneath the silted lakebed. It was in a section of the vast, deep reservoir far from any charted activity, a place that held its secrets close. When a specialized dive team finally breached the hidden structure, a clandestine, concrete chamber, it defied belief. Inside, shielded from time and decay, lay not just the answers but the brutal, meticulously concealed truth of what had happened. This wasn't just a disappearance, it was a carefully orchestrated vanishing, a secret buried with terrifying intent, waiting centuries to be uncovered. Sarah Miller, 28, an investigative journalist with a nose for corruption, and David Chen, 30, a promising architect, stepped into a nightmare from which only a breathtaking discovery could extract them. Their quiet weekend at a secluded lake house in the fall of 1981 was meant as an escape, a sanctuary for Sarah to process her explosive research and for David to sketch new designs. But the statistical probability of 2 vibrant lives simply evaporating without a trace, leaving behind a half-prepared meal and a car in the driveway, was 0. The lake house, their dream, became a silent witness to an impossible act. No struggle, no forced entry, just absence. It was this utter, unexplainable void that haunted their families and baffled the local authorities for decades. What could possibly make 2 people, so deeply connected, so thoroughly disappear from the face of the earth? The truth lay hidden, not just in the mud of the lake, but in the shadowy circles of power Sarah had dared to expose. Her meticulously kept journals hinted at a dangerous conspiracy within a powerful lakeside development project, a project David's firm was involved with. The cryptic notes spoke of blackmail, fraud, and whispers of murder, painting a picture far more sinister than a simple accident. For 44 years, her parents grieved the brilliant daughter they knew, while David's family mourned the steady, ambitious son. They clung to the hope of answers, facing a wall of official pronouncements that called it a drowning, a disappearance, anything but the grim reality that was slowly, painstakingly, being unearthed. The labyrinthine connections, the hushed warnings Sarah had received, the unsettling additions to David's blueprints, these were not random details but fragments of a terrifyingly organized plot. Sarah and David weren't just names on a missing person report. They were the beating heart of 2 families, extinguished in a single, devastating instant. Sarah, with her sharp mind and unwavering pursuit of justice, was the light of the Miller household, her parents' pride and joy. David, the steady presence, the dreamer whose hands shaped visions into reality, was the beloved son of 2 doctors, a man with his whole life ahead of him. Their shared dream was the lake house, a symbol of their future, now a tomb of their hopes. The image of Sarah meticulously organizing her notes, David lost in his architectural drawings, their shared laughter fading into the autumn air, is a tragic counterpoint to the stark reality of their likely fate, a reality that ripped through the fabric of 2 families, leaving an unfillable void. Now, after nearly half a century of agonizing uncertainty, the FBI has finally held the key that unlocks this decades-old mystery. The discovered evidence, the uncoded research, the precise architectural plans revealing secrets within secrets, it all points to a betrayal so profound, a conspiracy so deep, that it will redefine everything we thought we knew about their vanishing. This isn't just a cold case, it's a chilling testament to how far some will go to bury the truth. Join us as we delve into the dark heart of this story, uncovering the identities of those responsible and the devastating secrets of what truly happened to Sarah and David that fateful weekend at the lake house. Where are you watching from as we begin to unravel this shocking tale? The answers are here, and they are more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Sarah Miller and David Chen. 44 years ago, these names were synonymous with a life cut short, a future stolen. Sarah, a vibrant 28-year-old investigative journalist, possessed a mind like a finely tuned instrument, dissecting corruption with an almost visceral urgency. Her eyes, a startling shade of hazel, often held a flicker of fierce determination, a testament to her relentless pursuit of truth. She was compact, quick-footed, often seen with a well-worn notebook clutched in one hand, her fingers perpetually stained with ink. Sarah's presence was that of a contained storm, brilliant and powerful, yet capable of quiet empathy. David, 30 and an architect with a budding reputation, was her steady counterpoint. He was taller, with a calm composure and hands that spoke of creation, often dusted with architectural graphite. His dark, thoughtful eyes mirrored a deep well of intelligence and a quiet dedication to his craft. David was the architect of dreams, both on paper and in his personal life, a reliable presence who grounded Sarah's fiery spirit. Their shared laughter, a rare melody of quick wit and warm affection, echoed through the secluded lake house, a prelude to its somber silence. To know them was to witness a nascent symphony, a harmonious blend of intellect and heart, a partnership that promised brilliance. Their weekend routine at the lake house in October 1981 was a sanctuary of focused creation. Sarah would rise early, the scent of brewing coffee mingling with the crisp autumn air as she settled into her workspace, her fingers flying across the pages of her journals. Her systematic approach to her investigative work was legendary. Every overheard conversation, every cross-referenced document was meticulously catalogued. David, after a late breakfast, would retreat to his drafting table, the quiet scratching of his pencil a soothing rhythm against Sarah's focused intensity. Their shared meals were a brief respite from their solitary work, a chance to connect on the day's progress, hushed discussions punctuated by the crackle of the fireplace. Sarah's parents, Alina and Richard, had spoken often of her meticulous nature, her refusal to leave any detail unturned, a trait that made her sudden disappearance unfathomable to them. David's parents, both physicians, attested to his unwavering dependability, his commitment to every professional and personal promise. They were creatures of habit, anchored by a deep sense of responsibility that made any deviation from their scheduled lives, especially one of such magnitude, utterly impossible. Sarah's personality was defined by an almost stubborn integrity. It wasn't just about solving crimes, it was about fairness, about ensuring that power didn't trample on the innocent. Her parents recalled her childhood refusal to accept injustice, organizing neighborhood petitions over trivial matters if she felt something was wrong. David, while less overtly confrontational, shared a deep-seated sense of responsibility. He believed in building things that lasted, not just structures, but trust and integrity. His architectural ethics were unwavering. He once refused a lucrative contract when he discovered the client intended to cut corners on safety regulations, a decision that cost him dearly but solidified his reputation among peers. His colleagues at the firm spoke of his quiet resolve, his ability to remain calm under pressure. This shared moral compass, this unwavering commitment to doing what was right, formed the bedrock of their relationship, making the notion of them abandoning their principles at each other utterly unthinkable. Their future was not a nebulous concept, it was a meticulously planned canvas. Sarah had confided in her mother, just weeks before, about her hopes of publishing her findings, of bringing down the corrupt elements she'd uncovered. She spoke of the satisfaction she would feel, the relief for the community. David, too, had his dreams. He was sketching designs for a new community center, a project he was incredibly passionate about, alongside his work on the lakeside development. Had spoken of taking Sarah on a long-planned trip to Italy to sketch architectural wonders and finally relax after a demanding period. Their responsibilities were also significant. They were not drifters. Sarah felt a deep obligation to her parents, checking in regularly, eager to share her successes. David was instrumental in advising his younger sister, who was just beginning medical school. These were not fleeting connections. These were lifelines, emotional anchors that tethered them to their existence, their purpose, and their shared future. Sarah and David were, by all accounts, inseparable in their shared purpose, yet fiercely individual in their strengths. Sarah's brilliance was an investigative beacon, David's a creative force. They were two halves of a whole, a partnership that amplified their individual capacities. To suggest they simply walked away from their lives, from their families, from their burgeoning dreams, was to defy the very essence of who they were. There were no rumors of despondency, no signs of financial ruin or personal crisis that would precipitate such a drastic act. Sarah's meticulous nature left no room for casual departures, and David's steady nature made impulsive flight equally improbable. Their disappearance together at the same time from their remote, secluded sanctuary was an impossibility wrapped in a devastating enigma. It was a void so profound, so contrary to their known characters, that it cast a long shadow of doubt over any simple explanation, hinting at a force far more sinister at play. The Pacific Northwest was a place of muted colors and grand, silent spaces. In 1981, before the pervasive hum of smartphones and a world constantly connected, this region offered a profound sense of isolation, amplifying the quiet drama unfolding. Sarah Miller and David Chen had chosen just such an isolation for their autumnal escape. Their lake house, a modest, newly acquired cabin nestled on the western shore of Lake Cascade, a sprawling, deep reservoir cradled by the rugged, snow-dusted Cascade Mountains, was their sanctuary. The nearest paved road, Forest Service Road 17, was a rutted track that wound through dense stands of Douglas fir and western red cedar, often disappearing entirely under a carpet of fallen needles after a storm. Miles away from any substantial town, its nearest neighbor was a hermit-like trapper who rarely ventured out. The air itself carried the scent of damp earth, pine resin, and the crisp metallic tang of approaching winter. Even during the day, the dense canopy cast perpetual twilight over the forest floor, and by late afternoon, shadows lengthened, swallowing the limited sunlight, emphasizing the profound stillness of the place. The lake, Vast and often glassy under a steel-gray sky mirrored the brooding landscape, its depths as unfathomable as the secrets it would soon hold. October 1981 was a time of transition, painted in hues of russet, gold, and the deepest evergreen. The social fabric of the era was woven with threads of community reliance and a certain naivete regarding personal safety, especially in these remote locales. Cell phones were science fiction, communication relied on landlines, often shared party lines in rural areas, or handwritten letters. The disappearance of Sarah and David occurred against a backdrop of national events, the ongoing political shifts of the Reagan era, the burgeoning awareness of environmental issues, and a general undercurrent of unease as the Cold War persisted. For Sarah and David, the setting was not merely backdrop, it was an active participant in their lives. David, the architect, viewed the raw beauty as inspiration for his own creative projects, sketching new concepts inspired by the local topography and the rugged, unadorned beauty of the Pacific Northwest vernacular. The few scattered inhabitants of this lakeside domain existed in an ecosystem of quiet familiarity and shared dependence. Old Man Hemlock, the trapper, was a fixture in local lore, his infrequent trips to the general store in the distant town of Oak Haven providing the only real news. Sarah's parents, Eleanor and Richard Miller, and David's parents, Dr. Anya and Dr. Ben Chen, had both received assurances of their children's safe arrival. While the distance meant limited direct interaction, the parents share a common pride in their children's accomplishments and a growing anxiety about Sarah's sensitive investigative work. Their interactions were limited to weekly phone calls, filled with carefully curated updates, never revealing the full extent of their fears. Even the local sheriff, a capable but overwhelmed man named Brody, operated on a different rhythm in 1981. His jurisdiction covered vast tracts of wilderness, and crimes here were often characterized by missing hunters or minor disputes. The idea of a carefully orchestrated vanishing from such a secluded spot, far from prying eyes or immediate assistance, was outside his typical experience. The very elements that drew Sarah and David to this place also contained inherent risks. The dense forest, while beautiful, swallowed sounds and obscured vision, providing ample cover for anyone intent on unseen activity. The lake itself, deep and frigid, even in early autumn, was treacherous. More subtly, the burgeoning lakeside development, spearheaded by the financially ambitious and ethically flexible Timberline Corp, introduced a potent element of danger. Sarah's research hinted at dubious land deals, ignored environmental regulations, and even whispers of intimidation against those who opposed the project. David's involvement, designing portions of the resort complex, placed him unknowingly at the nexus of this escalating conflict, potentially drawing him into Sarah's peril. The isolation that guaranteed their privacy also meant that any distress signal they might send would go unheard, any cry for help lost to the rustling pine needles and the sigh of the wind through the ancient trees. This tranquil haven, so meticulously chosen as a refuge from their urban lives and city-based anxieties, was by its very nature a place where secrets could fester and disappearances could become ghosts in the wilderness. The quiet isolation, the very essence of its appeal, was the perfect canvas upon which tragedy would soon be painted. The half-prepared meal on the stove, the warm glow of lamps illuminating the empty living room, the car parked faithfully in the driveway. These were the silent testimonies of a weekend that began with permanent way and by shaping the fabric of two families, a starry comfort to the serene, undisturbed beauty of a lake that lay waiting. The alarm on Sarah Miller's digital watch chirped, a polite, insistent summons at 6:17 a.m. The November air in the secluded lake house was already frigid, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. She inhaled deeply, the crispness a welcome contrast to the city smog. Beside her, David Chen stirred, a low murmur of acknowledgement as he surfaced from sleep. His breathing was steady, even. The room, bathed in the weak, pre-dawn light filtering through the dense firs outside, held a profound stillness. The only sounds were their quiet movements, the rustle of bedsheets, the soft ticking of her watch. It was Saturday, November 14th, 1981, a day scheduled for focused work and peaceful respite, utterly unremarkable, pregnant with an irony none of them could perceive. The half-prepared dinner from last night still sat on the stove, a testament to a normalcy that would soon be irrevocably shattered. At 6:32 a.m., Sarah was already by the sturdy oak table designated as her research station. The scent of fresh, perked coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint, lingering aroma of wood smoke from the previous night's fire. She pulled on a well-worn, chunky knit sweater, its familiar warmth a comfort. Her parents had called her the night before, a brief check-in at 8:05 p.m., and she'd confirmed their safe arrival. Her mother's voice, always laced with a gentle concern for Sarah's intense investigative work, had asked, "Anything new, darling?" Sarah had smiled, a private, knowing smile, and replied, "Just organizing. Wish me luck on finalizing things." She remembered David's brief, sleepy conversation with his sister at 9:52 p.m. on Friday, reassuring her about his upcoming architecture firm project, his steady voice a calm presence. David rose at 7:01 a.m., moving with his characteristic quiet grace, dressed in comfortable jeans and a flannel shirt. He retrieved a half-eaten apple from the counter, its skin already beginning to brown, and took a long drink of coffee, his brow furrowed slightly as he gazed out the window at the mist clinging to the lake's surface. By 9:15 a.m., the lake house had settled into its rhythmic occupation. Sarah, hunched over her journals, meticulously worked through a section of her notes, her pen scratching rhythmically across the page. Her hazel eyes, sharp and focused, scanned coded entries detailing financial irregularities within the Timberline Corp development. She'd made a note at 8:47 a.m., Thorne's private financials, double-checked Julian's offshore accounts, unexplained transfers after the May meeting. Meanwhile, David, at 9:32 a.m., was at his drafting table positioned by the large bay window overlooking the water. The scrape of his pencil on the crisp paper was a melodic counterpoint to Sarah's silent industry. He was reviewing the detailed blueprints for the main lodge, making a pencil annotation at 9:41 a.m., Section C, basement access. Consider reinforced secondary egress. Aesthetic integrity paramount, but utility dictates. He had spoken to his parents the previous evening, a routine call at 7:30 p.m., promising to send updated sketches by Monday. Their last communal act was sharing a hurried, silent breakfast around 8:10 a.m., the half-prepared meal a ghost of intention on the stove. The afternoon wore on. At 2:23 p.m., Sarah made a call to a confidential source, her voice low, urgent, confirming his scheduled meeting for the following Tuesday in Seattle. The conversation lasted precisely 3 minutes and 17 seconds. At 3:48 p.m., David packed his drafting tools, the case clicking shut with a decisive finality. He mentioned to Sarah, around 3:00 p.m., that he wanted to take a final look at the lake's South Cove for inspiration for a park design he was considering. Sarah, engrossed in her work, had simply nodded, murmuring, "Just be careful, Lo. It's getting dark early." Her parents' final voicemail, received at 4:19 p.m., was a simple, affectionate "thinking of you both. Have a peaceful evening. Call tomorrow." The car, a familiar blue sedan, remained undisturbed in the driveway, its presence a solid anchor in the encroaching twilight. The last confirmed moment was 4:57 p.m. Sheriff Brody's log noted a passing fisherman, a Mr. Henderson, recalling seeing lights on in the lake house as dusk settled. He'd seen Sarah and David earlier in the afternoon, around 1:30 p.m., walking near the water's edge, their silhouettes distinct against the fading light. They appeared engaged in a quiet conversation, their movements unhurried, ordinary. Sarah had been wearing her favorite dark green jacket, David's hand resting lightly on her arm. There was no indication of distress, no hurried departure. It was a snapshot of lives unfolding as planned. The expectation was for them to be there, settled by the fireplace, perhaps sharing another quiet meal. But as night fully descended and the scheduled check-in time of 7:00 p.m. passed without a word from Sarah to her parents, a gnawing unease began to bloom, a seed of dread planted in the heart of that otherwise perfectly normal day. The house stood silent, bathed in the glow of the interior lamps, an empty vessel waiting for occupants who would never return. The first flicker of true unease for Alina and Richard Miller began not with a dramatic revelation, but a quiet absence. It was Sunday, November 15, 1981, and Sarah was expected to call by 7:00 p.m., as she always did when away for the weekend. The phone remained silent. Richard, a stoic man, checked the clock for the 10th time in as many minutes. Alina, her anxiety a low hum beneath her skin, tried to recall Sarah's exact words about finalizing things. Was it a hint of success, or a veiled warning? They replayed Sarah's last call from Friday evening, her voice bright but with that familiar undertone of focused determination. By 8:30 p.m., when the phone still hadn't rung, rationalizations began to fray. "Perhaps the line is down," Alina suggested, her voice lacking conviction. Richard tried their own phone, testing the connection, but it was clear. The growing silence wasn't just lack of communication, it was a void. It was a stark contrast to Sarah's meticulous nature, her unwavering commitment to checking in. Simultaneously, across town, David's parents, Dr. Enya and Dr. Ben Chen, experienced their own disquiet. David had promised to send updated architectural sketches by Monday, but a Sunday evening dinner call at 6:45 p.m. went unanswered. They knew David to be reliable, almost to a fault. He wouldn't simply fail to check in, especially after assuring his sister he was on track with his work. The remote location of the lake house, which had seemed so appealing for their son's desire for peace and focus, now felt like a significant barrier. Sarah was also known for her responsiveness, her quick wit usually matched by prompt communication. The fact that both young people, known for their grounded natures and mutual reliance, were unreachable simultaneously began to paint a far more unsettling picture than a simple missed check-in. The seeds of dread, planted separately, began to sprout into a shared, chilling realization. By 9:00 p.m. on Sunday, the shared silence had become a deafening roar of worry. Eleanor insisted they call Sheriff Brody. Richard, his voice tight with a growing fear he tried to suppress, made the call. "Sheriff Brody," he began, his voice betraying his agitation. "This is Richard Miller. My daughter, Sarah Miller. She's in a lake house up on Lake Cascade with her fiancé, David Chen. They were supposed to check in tonight, and they haven't. It's like them." The dispatcher, a young woman named Tammy, listened patiently. "Sir, I understand your concern, but Mr. Chen and Ms. Miller are adults. They have a right to their privacy and to come and going as they please." Richard's plea intensified. "But Sheriff Brody knows them. They are not the type to just vanish. Sarah's an investigative journalist. She's into some sensitive work. This isn't just a couple playing hooky. Something's wrong." Tammy promised to relay the information, planting a small seed of official concern, but the wheels of bureaucracy turned slowly against the tide of parental panic. The initial police response was, by necessity, limited and procedural. Sheriff Brody, already stretched thin with a vast county, assigned Deputy Miller, no relation to Sarah, to conduct a preliminary check of the lake house on Monday morning, November 16. Brody himself was skeptical. He dealt with his share of missing adult calls that turned out to be personal choices. However, the mention of Sarah's sensitive work and the fact that 2 people were unaccounted for did register. Deputy Miller's report, filed around 10:30 a.m., confirmed the worst fears. The lake house was undisturbed, lights still on, dinner half prepared on the stove, the car in the driveway. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle. The sheer normalcy of the scene amidst their absence was deeply disturbing. Sarah's notes were neatly stacked. David's drafting tools were in their case. It was as if they had simply evaporated. Deputy Miller logged the initial details, creating a missing persons report, but the lack of any immediate evidence of foul play limited the scope of his initial actions. The case was classified as a probable voluntary departure or an accident, pending further information, a classification that sent fresh waves of despair through both families. By the afternoon of Monday the 16th, Sheriff Brody, now understanding the gravity of the situation, authorized a more thorough, albeit still limited, search of the immediate vicinity. Deputy Miller and another deputy painstakingly combed the area around the lake house, noting the absence of any clear footprints leading away from the property, other than those of the reporting officers. They found a single, David's fishing lure, partially submerged near the water's edge, a detail that sparked the initial theory of a tragic drowning. Interviews were conducted with a few scattered neighbors, yielding nothing more than acknowledgement of seeing Sarah and David's car arrive Friday evening. The first 48 hours had passed with agonizing slowness, and the crucial window for finding survivors was closing. The investigative theories were broad: an accident while fishing or exploring, a sudden, unannounced departure, or something far more sinister. However, without any concrete evidence of a crime, the official response struggled to gain significant traction, leaving the families to grapple with the growing certainty of a deeper, darker reality. The initial mobilization, while procedural, felt woefully inadequate against the profound emptiness left behind, a frustrating prelude to the long road ahead. The sheer terror of Sarah and David's disappearance on that November weekend in 1981 ignited a wildfire of community concern, far exceeding what Sheriff Brody and his small department could manage. Within 48 hours of the official missing persons report, an impromptu search and rescue for Sarah and David Facebook group, hastily created by a concerned neighbor, exploded with hundreds of local residents offering aid. Volunteers, fueled by shared anxieties and a deep-seated need to help, transformed the small Oak Creek Community Center into a makeshift command post. Retired teachers offering to coordinate logistics, local business owners donating supplies, and even a group of young Boy Scouts meticulously mapping grid sectors of the vast wilderness. Divers, familiar with the treacherous depths of Lake Cascade, volunteered their weekends, while experienced hikers and mountaineers, who knew the surrounding trails like the back of their hands, organized into search parties. The palpable hope was infectious. The shared purpose united disparate parts of the community, from the oldest residents to the youngest teenagers, all united by the desperate hope of finding their missing neighbors, their collective determination a bulwark against the encroaching despair. The escalating crisis quickly overwhelmed local resources. Sheriff Brody's initial request for state police assistance was amplified as the sheer scale of the search became apparent. By Tuesday, November 17, 1981, the county was a hive of activity. The state police deployed a contingent of their own deputies, establishing a mobile command post near the lake, complete with satellite communication equipment to coordinate the disparate search efforts. Helicopters, normally reserved for emergency response, now crisscrossed the skies, their rotors a constant thrumming presence, while K-9 units, their handlers grim-faced and determined, scoured the dense underbrush. A specialized search and rescue SAR team from a neighboring county, equipped with advanced sonar and thermal imaging devices, arrived on Wednesday, bringing with them a crucial technological edge. The unified command structure, though strained, began to take shape, with Sheriff Brody reluctantly ceding oversight of the immediate search area to the state police, but maintaining leadership for local outreach and witness interviews, creating a complex, multi-agency operational network that consumed a significant portion of county and state resources. Amidst the vast, organized sweep, tiny fragments of potential hope began to surface, only to dissolve into further frustration. A discarded hiking boot found miles from the lake house, eerily similar to one David often wore, sent a surge of adrenaline through the search crews. Laboratory analysis, however, revealed it was a common brand, heavily worn, with no discernible connection to either Sarah or David, and likely lost by a long-forgotten hiker years prior. A fisherman, interviewed by a persistent Deputy Miller, claimed to have seen a distinctively dressed figure near the South Cove around dusk on Saturday, a report that initially ignited speculation of an accidental fall. Yet, further questioning revealed the fisherman's eyesight was poor, and he'd only been certain of having seen someone, not identifying either Sarah or David clearly. Sarah's parents, clinging to any shred of possibility, pored over her research notes, identifying a cryptic entry regarding a confidential rendezvous point that seemed to correlate with a particular section of the lake shoreline. When search teams meticulously scoured the area, all they found was undisturbed mud and the eerie silence of the untouched wilderness. Each promising clue, each potential lead, seemed to fray at the edges under closer inspection, leaving behind only a residue of dashed expectations and a deepening sense of futility. The immensity of the search area proved to be an insurmountable obstacle. Lake Cascade itself, with its unknown depths and frigid waters, was a daunting adversary for the dive teams. The surrounding national forest, an unbroken expanse of rugged terrain, dense old-growth forests, and treacherous ravines, stretched for hundreds of square miles, far beyond the capabilities of the available personnel and equipment of 1981. Moreover, the technology of the era, while functional, was primitive compared to today's advanced tracking and surveillance systems. Sonar units were bulky and had limited penetration, and helicopters lacked the sophisticated thermal imaging that could penetrate the forest canopy. Communication between the numerous volunteer groups and the official command centers was often hampered by weak radio signals in the remote valleys. Compounding these limitations were the weather itself. Sudden autumn storms rolled in with unnerving frequency, turning trails into treacherous mudslides and reducing visibility to near zero, forcing the suspension of crucial search operations and extinguishing the fragile hope that had begun to emerge. As the days bled into a week, the initial surge of community energy began to wane, replaced by the gnawing fatigue that accompanies prolonged, unanswered effort. The legions of volunteers, once a vibrant force, dwindled as they returned to work and family obligations, leaving ever-widening gaps in the search perimeters. Budgetary debates began to surface at county and state levels, questioning the escalating costs of the operation with no tangible results. Sheriff Brody, his face etched with strain, found himself feeling increasingly difficult questions from the media and the families, who, though still clinging to hope, were visibly wearing down. The vastness of the unknown, coupled with the technological and logistical constraints, solidified a grim understanding. Finding Sarah and David, if they were even still alive, would not be a swift, triumphant rescue. The sheer complexity of their disappearance transformed a focused search into a chilling realization this was not merely a missing persons case. It was a profound enigma, a deeply interwoven mystery that would demand a commitment far beyond the initial mobilization, hinting at a truth far more disturbing than anyone dared to imagine at the outset. The last flicker of active search for Sarah Miller and David Chen sputtered out in the biting winds of the late 1981 autumn. Weeks blurred into months as official resources, stretched thin by a desperate, fruitless endeavor, were gradually withdrawn. Sheriff Brody, his face etched with perpetual exhaustion, officially transferred the case files, a thick, disheartening testament to countless hours yielding nothing to the cold case unit of the state police. The helicopters ceased their mournful skyward patrols, the K-9 units were recalled, and the sonar equipment, so promising yet so unsuccessful, was packed away. The community center, once a bustling hub of shared purpose, slowly returned to its default state of quiet normalcy, its walls holding the echoes of fervent hope now fading into bureaucratic silence. The case, officially open yet dormant, became a ghost in the system, moved from active investigation to the dusty shelves of forgotten failures, its investigators reassigned to more immediate, solvable crises. For Sarah's parents, Eleanor and Richard Miller, the years that followed were a slow, torturous unraveling. The initial paralysis of grief gave way to a gnawing absence, a hollowness that time refused to fill. They observed their own milestones, anniversaries, birthdays through a haze of Sarah's missing presence. Richard, once stoic, retreated further into his books, finding solace in fictional narratives that offered resolutions absent in their own lives. Eleanor, however, became a keeper of memories, meticulously cataloging Sarah's childhood drawings and David's early architectural sketches, her hope transforming into a quiet, unyielding obsession. David's parents, Dr. Anya and Dr. Chen, struggled with their own unique burden. Their son, the steady architect, had vanished too, leaving a void in their orderly medical lives that defied diagnosis. They communicated with the Millers, a silent understanding passing between two families bound by a shared, inconsolable loss, their initial support network fracturing sometimes under the sheer weight of years without answers. As the decade turned, the story of the vanished couple began to morph from somber news report to local legend, then, with the advent of the internet, to a digital phenomenon. Dedicated online forums sprang up, buzzing with amateur sleuths dissecting every available detail. Podcasts emerged, delving into the murky depths of the case, often layering speculative theories built on fragmented evidence and sensationalized assumptions. They debated whether Sarah and David had staged their own escape, victims of a conspiracy too powerful to confront, or if they had met a tragic, lonely end in the unforgiving wilderness. While Sarah's parents found some comfort in the renewed public attention, seeing it as a way to keep Sarah's memory alive, David's parents often recoiled, distressed by the invasive speculation that reduced their son's life to a morbid game of conjecture. The tension between keeping his memory visible and protecting his privacy became a constant, agonizing tightrope walk. Fueled by a desperate need for closure, Eleanor and Richard Miller, and to a lesser extent, the Chen family, embarked on a quiet odyssey of private investigation. They pooled their resources, hiring a succession of private detectives who, month after frustrating month, hit the same impenetrable walls as the official investigators. They consulted psychics, their hope flickering with each vaguely worded pronouncement, only to be extinguished by the lack of tangible progress. There were even clandestine excursions into the wilderness around Lake Cascade, organized by amateur enthusiasts drawn to the mystery, each expedition ending with a hollow echo of unanswered questions and the chilling realization of the vastness of their search area. These attempts, while born from profound love and desperation, only deepened the cycle of hope and despair, draining their emotional and financial reserves with each unmet promise. Through the decades, the case became an indelible part of the Pacific Northwest's folklore, a cautionary tale whispered on the wind. New investigators would occasionally review the cold case files, their youthful optimism met with the same stubborn silence that had defeated their predecessors. The occasional cryptic clue is seemingly significant, but ultimately meaningless artifact found near the lake, a resurfaced witness account tinged with vagueness would briefly ignite public interest, only to recede into the broader tapestry of unsolved mysteries. The lake itself, a vast, silent entity, seemed to absorb their story, its depths holding their secrets as it had held them. The unresolved nature of Sarah and David's disappearance had woven itself into the fabric of the community, a permanent, nagging mystery, creating an atmosphere where something felt perpetually incomplete, as if the world was waiting, unknowingly, for a truth that lay buried, lost to time, yet poised to erupt. The hum of the FBI's state-of-the-art sonar system, designed to detect subtle anomalies on the lakebed, was a familiar, almost comforting background noise to Agent Anya Sharma. It was late October 2025, and a persistent drizzle veiled the already muted blues and greens of the Pacific Northwest. Anya, a rising star in environmental analysis, was meticulously sifting through gigabytes of sonar data from Lake Cascade, looking for unregistered industrial waste or seismic shifts. The routine had become a comfort after a particularly demanding case upstate. Then, at 3:17 p.m., a flicker on her screen caught her eye, an impossibly regular geometric outline, stark against the organic chaos of the lakebed, buried deep beneath centuries of silt in a sector far from any charted activity. It was an anomaly so out of place it defied categorization, an unnatural intrusion into the Earth's ancient strata. Her heart began to pound against her ribs, a discordant rhythm against the technological drone. It looked deliberate, like a buried secret. An overwhelming sense of disorientation washed over her, the sterile hum of the equipment suddenly amplified, the rain outside mirroring the chill that had settled deep within her. Intrigued, Anya escalated her findings. Hours later, under floodlights that pierced the deepening November twilight, a specialized dive team carefully breached the silted-over structure. What they uncovered defied belief. It was a sealed concrete chamber, remarkably preserved despite its decades submerged. The entrance, a heavy, reinforced hatch, was fused shut, requiring a precise, calculated extraction. As the team finally pried it open, a gust of stale, frigid air escaped, carrying with it the phantom scent of long-expired oxygen and something metallic, almost like old blood. Inside, two distinct, meticulously organized caches lay untouched by time or decay. The first, a sturdy, water-damaged leather satchel, spilled forth the uncoded journals of Sarah Miller, her meticulous script detailing a sprawling conspiracy of corruption, blackmail, and murder tied to the lakeside development, naming figures of significant power. Accompanying them were forensic traces, a tarnished silver locket, a familiar photograph, and a distinct, faded lipstick smudge on a piece of paper. In the second cache, nestled amongst architectural tools, lay David Chen's blueprints, not just for the resort, but for the entire development, revealing hidden access tunnels and unseen surveillance points, and alongside them, personal effects that conclusively identified him. The sheer preservation of the material, shielded from the elements, spoke volumes about the deliberate, terrifying intent behind its concealment. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of urgent, hushed activity. As the retrieved evidence was carefully bagged and transported to a secure FBI facility, a preliminary forensic team confirmed the physical presence of Sarah Miller and David Chen within the chamber, fragments of bone, clothing fibers that matched descriptions, and distinct DNA profiles. The findings were cross-referenced with existing historical data. The confirmation was chillingly absolute. The contents of this hidden tomb were unequivocally linked to the missing couple from 1981. The implications for the original investigation, or rather, the lack thereof, began to dawn on the arriving investigators. The pristine condition of the documents and the deliberate concealment of the chamber painted a grim picture, suggesting not an accident, but a meticulously orchestrated vanishing, a secret buried with terrifying precision, waiting centuries to be uncovered. The air crackled with a new kind of tension, far removed from the initial search efforts. This was the charged atmosphere of a crime unveiled, a decades-old cover-up brought to light. Back at the FBI field office, the discovery sent shockwaves through the department. Cold case files, once relegated to dusty archive shelves, were unearthed with a newfound urgency. Sheriff Brody, now retired but still a respected local figure, was contacted, his initial report from 1981 scrutinized with renewed intensity. Agents who had long since moved to different divisions were recalled, their memories of the fruitless search for Sarah and David jarred back into sharp focus. A joint task force was immediately assembled, comprising agents from the FBI's Major Crimes Division, forensic experts, and liaisons with local and state law enforcement. The names Sarah Miller and David Chen, once synonymous with unending mystery, were now at the forefront of a burgeoning investigation poised to rewrite local history. The sheer scale of the recovered evidence hinted of a conspiracy far deeper and more sinister than anyone had previously conceived. Their understanding of the case, previously crippled by a lack of definitive evidence, was now irrevocably transformed. This was no longer a cold case, it was a freshly uncovered crime scene, demanding immediate, comprehensive attention. The weight of the discovery bore down heavily on the families who had endured 44 years of agonizing uncertainty. Eleanor and Richard Miller, now in their late 70s, were informed by a carefully composed team of FBI agents and victim services specialists. The news, delivered with immense sensitivity, was a paradox of agonizing relief and renewed grief. The truth, finally beginning to surface, was brutal, confirming their deepest fears while simultaneously shattering any lingering hope of a peaceful resolution. Across town, David Chen's aging parents, Dr. Anya and Dr. Ben Chen, received similar news, their stoic composure finally giving way to tears of loss. Yes, but also tears of a terrible, horrifying understanding. The carefully guarded secret, the whispered theories, the unanswered questions that had defined their lives for over 4 decades were finally yielding answers. The community, too, reacted with a mixture of shock and somber reflection. The ghost of the lost couple, once a local legend, was now a palpable presence, a testament to a profound betrayal, and the promise of the full, terrifying truth was just beginning to emerge. The late afternoon sun, a weak, watery affair through the persistent Pacific Northwest clouds, cast long shadows across Agent Anya Sharma's desk. The sterile hum of analytical equipment was now a constant companion in the task force's newly established war room, an expanse of whiteboards and glowing monitors that had replaced decades of dusty silence. The discovery at Lake Cascade had triggered a seismic shift, transforming a cold case into an active, high-priority investigation. FBI, state police, and local sheriff's departments were now united in their purpose, a formidable coalition marshaled to unravel the 40-year-old enigma of Sarah Miller and David Chen. Emergency meetings were a daily ritual, bringing together seasoned investigators, forensic specialists, and data analysts, each contributing a vital piece to the monumental puzzle. Modern technology, unimaginable in 1981, was being deployed with ruthless efficiency. High-resolution satellite imagery was overlaid with historical topographical maps, K9 units, now equipped with DNA-SEN technology derived from recovered personal effects, were being deployed to re-examine the lake periphery, and advanced spectral imaging was scanning Sarah's meticulously preserved journals for latent clues invisible to the naked eye. The air thrummed with a fresh, potent urgency. This was not just another cold case review, but the definitive opportunity to bring closure to two families and justice to a community long shadowed by unanswered questions. The discovery of the submerged chamber had fundamentally reshaped every prior assumption, turning the tragic accident theory on its head and demanding a complete reevaluation of everything known and unknown about Sarah and David's final weekend. Inside the FBI forensics lab, a cadre of specialists worked with an intensity that belied the years that had passed. DNA profiling, a technique in its nascent stages back in 1981, was now a cornerstone of the revived investigation. Genetic markers meticulously swabbed from Sarah's lipstick-stained note and David's scattered architectural tools were cross-referenced with familial DNA samples provided by their aging families. The results were irrefutable. The fragmented remains found within the concrete chamber belonged unequivocally to Sarah Miller and David Chen. Further analysis of the silk fibers from Sarah's blouse and the cotton weave of David's shirt, preserved by the anaerobic environment of this submerged chamber, provided an even more precise temporal framework for their final moments, pinpointing their probable most to the very weekend they vanished. Latent fingerprint analysis on the recovered blueprints, previously dismissed as insignificant smudge marks, now yielded clear impressions belonging to both Sarah and David, alongside several unidentified prints. These, combined with trace particulate analysis of specific soil and industrial solvent residues found within the chamber, began to paint a chillingly detailed picture of a meticulously planned, sophisticated operation designed to permanently conceal the evidence of their murder. The renewed scrutiny of Sarah's journals, now accessible through advanced digital imaging that revealed subtle annotations and invisible ink, proved revolutionary. What had once been cryptic entries about Thorne's stealings and unaccounted funds were now illuminated by contextual data recovered from encrypted financial records, recently declassified through Freedom of Information Act requests. Sarah's coded references to Julian's private sanctuary and the hidden egress on the foundation plans coalesced with David's detailed blueprints of the development project. These plans, unlike the publicly filed versions, contained intricate, annotated diagrams of a clandestine auxiliary structure behind the main lodge, complete with soundproofing specifications and a hidden water access point. The seemingly random placement of David's architectural sketching tools in the second cache within the chamber now made terrifying sense. He had likely been forced to work on the very plans that would seal his fate and Sarah's. Apparently insignificant details from witness statements, such as a fisherman's vague recollection of seeing unfamiliar construction equipment near the lake shortly after the disappearance, suddenly gained critical importance when overlaid with the architectural data revealing Thorne's company had obtained special permits for emergency shoreline reinforcement during that exact period. The pieces, scattered and indecipherable for 4 to 4 years, were finally aligning into a coherent, horrifying narrative. The confluence of Sarah's detailed investigative notes, David's damning architectural schematics, and the irrefutable forensic links to their remains led the task force to a singular, chilling conclusion. Sarah and David were not victims of a random accident or a hasty crime of opportunity. They were systematically lured to their deaths, their presence a threat to a deeply entrenched criminal enterprise orchestrated by Julian Thorne, the charismatic CEO of Timberline Corp. The hidden chamber, designed by David under duress, served as both a temporary detention facility and a meticulously concealed execution site. Sarah's meticulous documentation of Thorne's illegal activities, money laundering, environmental violations, and the intimidation of opposition, corroborated by the recovered financial records, established his motive. David's architectural knowledge was instrumental in the chamber's construction, an unwitting contribution to his own demise. The unidentified fingerprints found within the chamber yielded direct matches to 2 former Timberline Corp security personnel, now elderly, but still alive, who had been coerced into silence and complicity. The evidence unequivocally pointed to Thorne and his inner circle as the orchestrators of a brutal cover-up, a conspiracy born from greed and executed with chilling efficiency. With the perpetrator and the method definitively identified, the task force shifted its focus to the final stages of the investigation. Arrest warrants were drafted, targeting the now septuagenarian Julian Thorne and his surviving accomplices, preparing for a confrontation decades in the making. Simultaneously, FBI victim services specialists carefully prepared a plan to deliver the full truth to Sarah's parents, Elena and Richard Miller, and David's surviving family members. The weight of the impending revelation was palpable, a mixture of agonizing relief and profound grief shadowing every decision. The FBI's understanding of the case was now complete, the mystery of what happened and who was responsible resolved. The remaining pieces were the legal ramifications and the immense emotional fallout. The investigation had not only uncovered a decades-old murder, but had also illuminated the systemic failures that allowed such a crime to remain buried for so long. The stage was meticulously set for the final act, for the truth to finally break through the suffocating silence and reshape the lives of everyone touched by the vanished couple of Lake Cascade. The air in the makeshift courtroom crackled not with the sound of gavels, but with the palpable weight of 44 years of silence finally broken. Julian Thorne, wizened and frail but his eyes still sharp with a chilling avarice, sat impassively as Agent Anya Sharma presented the final piece of evidence. David Chen's original blueprints, meticulously annotated with the hidden chambers design, now cross-referenced with Sarah Miller's recovered financial ledgers detailing Thorne's systematic corruption. The jury, a solemn cross-section of the community who had lived for decades under the shadow of an unsolved mystery, listened intently. The two identified accomplices, their faces etched with a lifetime of complicity and fear, offered testimony confirming Thorne's directive to silence Sarah and David permanently, detailing how David had been coerced into unknowingly aiding in the construction of their own tomb. The discovery of the meticulously preserved chamber and its contents had provided irrefutable proof, turning abstract theories into stark, undeniable reality. The final verdict, delivered with a gravity that echoed the long delay, was guilty on all counts: conspiracy, murder, and obstruction of justice. Thorne received a life sentence, the accomplices sentenced to decades behind bars, a justice painstakingly and belatedly served. The notification to Elena and Richard Miller and to David Chen's aging parents, Dr. Anya and Dr. Ben Chen, was a process handled with utmost care by a team of FBI victim services specialists. They met the families together again, in a quiet room at the FBI field office, a stark contrast to the chaos of the initial search days. Anya Sharma and Sheriff Brody, now a retired but still respected figure, were present. The truth, once a tormenting ghost, was laid bare. Sarah and David had not simply vanished but had been murdered, their lives brutally extinguished by a conspiracy of greed and power. Elena clutched Richard's hand, her face a mask of profound sorrow, yet beneath it, a dawning relief. A different kind of peace, one born of knowing, settled over her. David's parents, their initial stoicism dissolving into quiet tears, finally understood the inexplicable void that had defined their lives. The horror of their children's fate was immense, but knowing the truth, however devastating, was a release from the decades of agonizing uncertainty. It was shared grief, now with an undisputed source, that bound them closer than ever. The revelation sent ripples through the community and beyond. The ensuing legal battles, though complex due to the passage of time and the extensive cover-up, were bolstered by the undeniable forensic evidence. The convictions served as a powerful indictment of the corruption Sarah had so bravely exposed. The community, once divided by speculation, united in a collective sense of shock and reckoning. The systemic failures that allowed the crime and its subsequent obscuration to persist for so long triggered swift legislative action. New protocols for cold case investigations were implemented statewide, emphasizing the critical role of advanced forensic technologies and interagency cooperation. A congressional inquiry was launched into the decades-long oversight failures, leading to reforms designed to prevent similar conspiracies from taking root and being buried. The legacy of Sarah Miller and David Chen shifted from that of tragically lost individuals to symbols of courage against overwhelming odds. In the quiet aftermath, Elena and Richard Miller and David's parents established the Sarah and David Truth and Justice Foundation. Its mission was to support investigative journalism, advocate for environmental protection, and fund cold case re-examinations, ensuring that no other family would face decades of unanswered questions. Annual commemorations were held at Lake Cascade, no longer a place of mystery and dread, but a memorial to lives lost and truths unearthed. The lake's serene beauty now served as a constant reminder of the darkness that can hide beneath the surface and the enduring power of persistence. Sarah's meticulous journals, now preserved and digitized, became a testament to the importance of unyielding inquiry, while David's architectural drawings, including those detailing the hidden chamber, served as a stark warning about the consequences of unchecked ambition and complicity. Their story became a beacon, illuminating the path toward a more just and transparent future, a powerful testament to the fact that while lives can be extinguished, the pursuit of truth can resonate through generations. The story of Sarah Miller and David Chen, a narrative woven from courage, corruption, and an enduring hope for truth, became a profound reflection on the human spirit's resilience. It underscored the critical importance of vigilance against pervasive injustice and the quiet courage it takes to uncover buried truths, no matter how long it takes. Their sacrifices, though etched in pain, were not in vain. They sparked a movement, forever altering the landscape of justice and remembrance, reminding us that even in the deepest silence, the voice of truth can always find a way to surface. Like this video and subscribe to the channel for more compelling stories.